Hello everybody, it is Dingle here and welcome back to my channel. I hope y'all are doing super duper well. I have been seeing this trend going around TikTok. I don't know if it's really a trend, it's not like a sound or anything, but people are just spewing random facts about themselves, maybe things that people might not know. And if you asked me if I thought that people cared about random facts about me, I would say no, but I can't stop watching these videos on TikTok, so I thought it might be interesting for at least some of you guys, especially since a lot of you all stumbled across our channel recently with our infertility journey. And whenever I stumble across a creator on something specific that I was looking for, or something specific I clicked on, I'm always like yearning to just know what makes them them. So I don't know where this video is gonna go, but we're gonna start at the beginning and I'm gonna do my makeup because Jack and I are grabbing some drinks with friends in a little bit and we'll just see where this takes us. If you're new and you're just stumbling across this video now, hello. Make sure you subscribe before you leave if you resonate with anything that I talk about today or you want to just see more content from us. I figured we would just start from the beginning, like I said, and see where we go. So my name is Mac. Most people call me Mac or they call me Dingle. Like my husband literally does call me Dingle and Dingle is my last name. But my mom and dad named my brothers and I knowing that they would call us by our middle names, and then they wanted to incorporate some family names as the first name. So my name is June Mackenzie, but I go by Mac, and June is after my grandmother on my dad's side. I have two younger brothers, so that makes me the oldest, and I would say I definitely fit the profile of oldest sibling, especially maybe like oldest sister. I would say I've always been very, I don't want to say like performance driven, but grades were always super important to me and I always wanted to make those around me proud of me and do the right thing and follow all the rules. But I also can be headstrong, so if the rules don't really make sense to me, I have a hard time following them without putting up a stink, that is. I grew up in a super small town in Massachusetts. I always say that there were more cows than people in that town. It was very farming oriented. We didn't even have stoplights in my town. We had stop signs, but we had no traffic lights. I'll have to fact check this part, but I remember sitting in the theater watching Twilight for the first time with my mom, and when Bella was moving to Forks, it flashed the population on the sign when she was like entering Forks, because the movie was trying to portray how small of a town Bella was moving to, how tiny it was. And I remember my mom leaning over and saying that the town that we live in has less people than that. In school, I gravitated towards science and the science subjects, and later on when psychology was offered, I was obsessed with psychology. But my interests growing up were very tomboy-esque. I was obsessed with Legos and obsessed with that like robotics thing that Lego had. My school didn't have a robotics team, but I know a lot of other schools did, and if it did have a robotics team, I definitely would have been on it. I just always had a fascination with building things and mechanics in a way. Like in second grade, we were studying the Iditarod. This just popped into my head. I remember studying the Iditarod, that dog racing, sled racing sport, and I just became obsessed with it, but more so obsessed with how all the dogs were dragging these people for that many days. And I wanted to build them myself so that I could play with them at home, kind of like toys. So I would ask my mom if I could go to the store and get poster board and other different materials, and I used to make sleds, like tiny little sleds like this, and then I would have all these different like yarns and strings and plastic huskies, and I would make Iditarod sleds out of templates that I would make myself. Oh my gosh, that is unlocking some memories. So that's the stuff I gravitated towards and I was into, and because of that, I had a lot of friends that were boys growing up because we had a lot of similar interests. I remember when we would go over to our family friend's house, I was very close with the boy of the family, but her mom would always want me to play with her daughter instead, and my brother to play with the boy that I was close with instead. But I didn't have as many similar interests as the daughter, so I would sneak downstairs to the basement where the boys were playing like Legos and video games and stuff until the mom would like find me down there and encourage me to go up and play with her daughter. Again, if the rules don't make sense to me, I'm not gonna follow them. I was also really sporty growing up, but not in the traditional sense of like soccer and things. I actually did gymnastics for 8 years of my life. As someone who was incredibly shy growing up, it taught me a lot of confidence because you literally have to step up to your event solo and perform for a table of judges that have like a pen and paper and are writing down everything that you're doing wrong. So it definitely helped with confidence in that way. And it also helped me stay out of any school drama. While a lot of kids were having drama with who was invited to what birthday parties, and then in middle school when girls would have their like middle school drama and all of that stereotypical stuff, I was too busy being in the gym for 20 hours a week after school. I stopped doing gymnastics in 8th grade. It wasn't a super dramatic exit. I just decided one day that I was done and that was it, because it was clear to me that it was coming to a point where you had to decide whether you were going to continue on in the competitive realm and start training for national status or Olympic status, or just stop or just do it for fun. So I was kind of at that crossroads, and I knew that I didn't want this to take over the rest of my life, and I was also kind of over it. And so I decided that I wanted to try something new, and that something new was soccer. But I went into my first soccer game not knowing the rules at all, and before the coach put me in, I had to ask her, how do you play this sport? So I went onto the field like a freaking buffoon, but I did have speed on my side. I was very fast, but I remember chasing the ball and I was going too fast when I got to the ball and I didn't know what to do, and I kind of tripped over my body, but instead of just falling onto the grass, I did a somersault to catch myself because that just seemed like the most logical way to fall, and nobody has ever let me forget that moment. Although I was really science oriented and I was super interested in the subject, school never came easy to me at all. I remember eventually realizing that in order to get the B's that I was getting, it seemed like I was studying more and putting more effort and tears into it than my classmates who were pulling straight A's. At this point, my brother had already been diagnosed with dyslexia. So since we already knew the doctors and the, I don't know what you call them, psychologists to go to, my mom offered for me to get tested as well. And it turns out that I definitely have dyslexia, but I also have ADHD on the attentive side and not the hyperactive side. But because it's not hyperactive, I don't know if we would have ever caught it because it just didn't present as the stereotypical ADHD or ADD that people think about when they think about that diagnosis. I think it was cool to find out that I had it because it was really validating when it came to how much I struggled in school, but I didn't want to go on any medicine for it, and I basically didn't do anything about it until I hit college, because college hit me like a ton of freaking bricks. My GPA at college was consistently in the 2s, not necessarily flunking out, but not really doing the best. Because my brother had a lot more experience with dyslexia and learning disabilities than I had at that point, I knew that extra time on tests was a possibility for me if I were to simply pass along the testing results that I had onto my college. Because with how much effort I was putting in studying and how important school was to me performance-wise, I eventually realized that I wasn't stupid. It was just that I was a really, really, really bad test taker. As soon as the teacher would tell us it was time to start the test, that heart rate, that anxiety, oh my gosh, it was through the roof, and it would cloud my ability to comprehend the questions that were being asked. And that smashed against the fact that I knew I had a finite time that I had to finish this test. But for junior year, I set out a goal that by the time I graduate, so by the time I was done senior year, I wanted to get my cumulative GPA to a 3.0 or higher. And with where I was at within the 2s, that was gonna take a lot. That was gonna take a lot of good grades, but I figured with this extra time, I think I could do it. And by the time I graduated, I remember I had a 3.056, I want to say. So it was higher than a 3.0. And I'll never forget that because that was the first time where I saw my efforts directly correlate with an accomplishment. And it felt really freaking good. But while we're on college, I went to school in Kentucky. It wasn't in Lexington or Louisville. It was kind of in between there, but it was also in a really small town. It was a school of, I think, 1,300 kids total, but it was still much bigger than my high school. But even though I went from one small town to the other, I got to meet so many different people at school who came from so many different places and so many different backgrounds and so many different ways of looking at the world. And that was the first time I've been exposed to those types of things. And I just remember loving it. And I think it was really important to see the world through different people's eyes who come from different places, different experiences. And that was my first time experiencing that. Let's talk a little bit about Jack and I because he clearly fits into all of this. I know this is gonna sound super pick-me. I hate that term anyway, but when I was in high school, because of my interests that I mentioned before and also the fact that I have two brothers, I naturally got along with guys as friends. And it's not that I didn't like hanging out with my girlfriends, it's just that whenever I would hang out with guys or make friends with guys in class, it was just more homey to me, it was more familiar for me. And I also found girls were kind of mean because don't forget, I kind of missed that lesson in middle school that girls were mean. So when I quit gymnastics right before high school, I had to kind of learn that the hard way. But of course in late middle school into high school, our hormones are going crazy and everybody is obsessed with who's dating who and who likes who, and no one can just be friends with guys. Like girls and guys can't be friends without one of them either catching feelings or their friends convincing them that we should date. Because of that, I almost dated my guy friends a few times, but nothing ever sat right with me. I kind of was convincing myself that we should date because that's what everybody is doing, but I just couldn't pull the trigger on those relationships. It just didn't feel right. So then naturally, I thought that I was gonna die alone at the age of 16. No, but in all seriousness, it came down to senior year, right before prom, and that's super close to graduation and the summer before college, and I was convinced that, you know, my person isn't here and that's totally fine. I'll probably meet my person in college. And then Jack Schaefer stumbled into my life at the most unopportune time too. During senior year, we had a big friend group and there were a couple people that were dating each other within the friend group, but not the majority at all. So we all decided that we would go to prom with each other, all as friends. And that was super fun. So I went with one of our guy friends and Jack went with one of our girlfriends, but she actually stayed up all night the night before writing her admission letter to Harvard, which she did get in, so it was worth it. But because of that, she ended up falling asleep on the dining chairs at our prom. And I always thought that Jack was super cute, but I never thought that it was in my league at all. Because Jack was a football player, he was friends with everybody, including the drama club, including the popular crowd, including our crowd, which wasn't popular, but we weren't like not popular because we all kind of had each other, you know? But yeah, I never thought that that was a possibility at all. But because we had gone to prom kind of as like a massive friend group, we naturally would kind of like be close to each other on the dance floor. And Jack's date fell asleep, so that just seemed like an opportunity. Long story short, we danced at prom and then we spent all night talking at an after prom party, literally until the sun came up, and the rest was history. If you guys want to know the details on that, I think we have a story time on this channel, and if we do, I will link it down below. But I do remember a few friends having some choice opinions about Jack and I getting together before going off to college, including some some of my friends' moms actually. I remember I was on a mini vacation with a group of girlfriends, and one of the moms was literally in the kitchen, not talking directly at me, but we were just like all hovering around the kitchen, and she was literally saying that you don't want to go to school attached to a boyfriend or a girlfriend because that would limit you and you would be held back and all this stuff. And to hear that at 17 was really hard, especially since I just knew how much I loved him. But all I have to say to that is look at us now. I would say, looking back, that was probably my first ever lesson that we just have to do us in this life, because if I ended up living for other people in that regard, when it came to Jack, my life would look so different right now, and I personally can't imagine a life without Jack in it. There's so many other like random facts about me, I feel like, that I could spew about, but while we're on the subject of not letting other people influence our choices in life, I want to talk about the second major lesson that I had on this subject. So when I grew up, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to this, the standard was you go to school, you know, elementary school, middle school, high school, and then you immediately go to college. There's no such thing as a gap year back then, or if there was, it was super rare. Or even technical schools, honestly. In my town that I grew up in, the next step was college, no questions asked. And while I know that that is not an option for a lot of people, and I'm super grateful that that was even an option, I do wish that there were other options that we were aware of, that people are more aware of today. And then after college, you get a job, obviously, because you have to pay for rent and bills and all that stuff. You get a job with a 401k because you have to set yourself up right for retirement. You also show loyalty to your job because on a resume it looks the best. This is just the trajectory that I knew. It looks the best to stay at a job for at least 5 years before moving on to another one for a salary bump or any other reason, fit, anything. So that is the standard trajectory that I knew, you know, just the very standard, you get a job, you do it until you die, etc. And I felt very lucky to have gotten a job right outside of school, because when we graduated college, the job market was absolute trash. So I took the very first thing that I could, and the people were awesome. I had actually interned with them the summer before, and I grew a really great relationship with the owners and the employees, and just everyone was just like so sweet. Like, I know that people like to rag on the saying of work family, but that's really what it is. A couple of my bosses actually ended up coming to Jack and I's wedding, and we've met up since then to go to comedy shows and things like that. And I think it's really special, and I feel really grateful to have that relationship with the people that we've worked with for so long. But at a certain point, my relationship with the job itself, not the people or the employees or anything like that, became so toxic. It consumed my entire life. It consumed all of my thoughts, and I ended up developing super bad anxiety around my job. The job itself was such a fast-paced job. There was never enough hours in the day, and everything always seemed to be needed ASAP, or something was always on fire. And I had a lot of responsibility around team members, because at the end of the day, the position that I was in was client-facing. So if there was ever anything wrong, or this needed to be changed, or there was budget issues or anything like that, they came to me first. And I have learned that that is just not a good fit. I barely ever slept because of my racing, anxious thoughts. I was convinced the world was going to stop if I dropped one minor detail on one of my 10 projects that I was managing. And to be completely open, some of the clients that I was working with were just not very nice, and I didn't handle that very well. I would say 3 out of the 5 work days I would wake up and get physically sick, and then I would brush myself off and I would go into the office because that is how anxious I was during these years. But because all I knew was going to school and getting a job with a 401k and you stay with them for X number of years, I felt so stuck. The idea of leaving that job was failing to me. If I left, that is a failure on my part. In 2019, everything came to a head and I reached my breaking point. I opened up to my bosses that I mentioned before that I consider friends, and they couldn't have been more supportive or empathetic. And they told me to take all the time I needed. And ultimately, I knew that I couldn't go back. The way that I slid so far into my anxiety and depression, I knew that that was not an option to go back. Just like before, it wasn't an option to leave, all of a sudden, it wasn't an option to go back. So I took some time. I actually taught online for a little bit with the company Q Kids. That was really, really fun. And for the first time, I felt like I had control over my days and my schedule. And all of a sudden, even though I was waking up at like 4:50 in the morning to teach kids over in China by 5 a.m. my time, I felt free. And there was color back in the world again, and everything was so happy, and life was worth living. It was worth truly living. Only about a month or month and a half later, one of my bosses reached out to me because he knew that I liked to video edit, and he had a set of videos that he needed me to help on. And at that point, I was putting more time into YouTube and Twitch and just social media in general. But how cool was it that I would get to edit videos for the people that I really liked at that company without any of the anxiety or the running around or the fast-pacedness, for an income as well. That was a turning point for me. And even doing those videos for them, and then eventually I started managing their social accounts, I'm able to dedicate time to the stuff that I am so passionate about and I love so much, while also maintaining a 2-income household. I pinch myself every single day. But I look back at that time of uncertainty when I just dropped my full-time job because I had never been without a full-time job since graduating school, and that notion to me of quitting your job without a solid next step was just so terrifying and so unheard of in my world. But when I did it, and the world kept turning and everything ended up being okay, and I didn't fail, I look back at that time with such fondness because I learned so many life lessons within just those few short months. But the biggest one is that there is not one timeline that fits for everybody. And you can make those leaps and you can jump. And your happiness at the end of the day does matter. It's arguably the only thing that matters, because this might sound dark, but I remember thinking about myself when I'm super old and wrinkly and nearing the end, looking back and regretting not taking more leaps for myself. There is no one way to do this life. There are no step-by-step instructions or any right way to do one thing or wrong ways to do things. It's your life. And falling in love with Jack the summer before going off to college, and then quitting my 9-to-5 401k full-time job at the age of, I want to say, 26, were two of the scariest things that I've ever done and the most uncertain things that I've ever done, but they're also two of the most rewarding leaps that I've ever taken in this life. I can't lie to you all, I am not looking forward to editing this video because I have no idea where my thoughts or rambling went. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you resonated with anything that I said, or you want to list off some things that people might not know about you, I would love to read them, so make sure to comment down below. Also, there are just so many other things that I probably could have rambled about, so if you ever want me to do just a regular Q&A, also let me know in the comments below. But if you are new, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. My battery is about to die, so I love you all so much, and I will catch you in the next video, my friends. I'll see you later. Bye!